Welcome to the Money Over 50 podcast, brought to you by Dallas Davison and Michael Hogue from Money Over 50 Financial Advisors. This information is general in nature and does not take into account your objectives, financial situation, or needs. Therefore, you should consider whether the information is appropriate for you and your personal circumstances. If you require personal advice, please contact Money Over 50 Financial Advisors. Here are your hosts, Dallas Davison and Michael Hogue.
Welcome to Money Over 50 with Dallas and Michael. Dallas, today we're here to talk about your advisor and the level of involvement that your financial advisor should actually have in your life.
Thanks, Michael. This was actually my theory or concept. This is one of those, like in many of our topics, where it was just an idea that popped into my head. I don't really know where we're going with this conversation, but where it came up is we're getting organised now for we're starting to get the ball rolling, getting organised for our end of calendar year review of all their existing clients. And at this time of the year, we'll normally basically pick out a project that we look at for every one of our clients. And this year we're talking about estate planning. So, have they got a will in place? Have they got, have they got binding nominations on this super fund? How have they got this super fund structure? How have they got all these proceeds structured to go out to either dependent or non-dependent beneficiaries in a way that's the most tax effective for them, all these sorts of things. So, and what it got me thinking was, because we've talked about this before, where we'll probably say to our clients, hey, this is, you've got a review coming up. This is what we're going to look at. If you want us to look into if you want us to get involved, we can speak to your solicitor who's done a will up, or we can speak to a solicitor about helping you get a will set up. With a lot of these things, there's always a danger that we're overstepping and getting involved in things that people don't want us to be involved with. So, and it does happen. Like, we'll probably give this, we'll position this as this is an offer to our clients. If you want us to review this, we can, and if you're not, then there's no skin off our nose. But sometimes people go, I've got a will. I don't want to think about that. That's a separate issue. I'm not in a headspace to think about that, or I don't want to know about that, or I don't want you to be involved in that. But it just got me thinking that you sort of need to, as a financial advisor, you need to err on the side of being too involved in too many financial decisions and offering those things to your clients and to people around you, rather than sitting back and the client themselves getting involved. Because what I've found is that a lot of people don't necessarily know how different aspects of your financial life roll in together. And so this is, I think, what we find. I think this is the theory of what I'm talking about here, is that I find this with a lot of new meetings with people, where they'll sort of talk about, one of the things that I want to look at is, how do I maximize my Centrelink in retirement? And you kind of then going, well, Centrelink's one part of it, but also how you have your money in super is another part of it, and your tax income and your tax each year is another part of it. And so all those different aspects need to sort of flow in together. And so if you're trying to only give advice around one area, it tends to be a flawed model, because you might be giving advice about, here's how you maximize your superannuation. But you might be doing that in a way that actually means that the benefit that you're causing there is causing you more of a drop in Centrelink age pension than what you'd get, or you're maximizing outcomes you're maximizing returns in one way, but then you're actually paying more in tax than the benefit that you're getting. So I think the concept here is maybe not just about financial advisors, but for people just to realize how complex even the very basic financial situation is, and how there are many moving parts, and all of them need to be taken into account.
Yes, and really your financial advisor, our belief is that they should be the hub of all of that.
Yep.
And look, there's we're talking about very, very specialist areas here in a lot of circumstances. So I have a client who owns a family business, and right now her accountant is and her lawyers are actually drafting up things like buy-sell agreements and different tax structures and entities and all those types of things. So they're very, very specialist in those particular areas, and we don't have the skill or expertise. What I've been able to do with them is really brief them on what what her values are.
Yeah.
And
What's
what we're
important
looking
to
to,
her.
what's important to her, what we're looking to achieve,
over
all of those
long
types
term.
of things.
Yeah.
So really, each one of those areas is generally works independent of other professionals.
Yep.
It's one of those things that we see our role, or the role of a good financial advisor, as being the hub of that.
Yeah.
And making sure that all of that flow, all of those specialist areas, so tax in this instance,
Yep.
and legal structures,
Yep.
two specialist distinct areas,
Yep.
and it's a case of the left hand not talking to the right in a lot of cases.
Yeah, that's a great example and an analogy there of being the hub of that, because, and whether it's, I guess the thing is, whether you have a financial advisor or not, someone needs to be the hub of that. But what you need to realize is that if you're engaging professionals, if you don't have a financial advisor, you need to be your own hub. And so if you're engaging a lawyer to draft up legal documents for you, the lawyer is looking at that through a legal perspective. And so you cannot expect them to be, and in this case, I'm sure the lawyer is thinking about everything from an asset protection point of view. And what happens if you get sued personally? What happens if, the entity gets sued? And what happens if, there's a workplace injury? And what happens if this and what happens if that? The accountant isn't really probably thinking about asset protection at all. They're thinking about it from a tax point of view. And, okay, well, how do we minimize tax? Basically, hopefully, if they're a good accountant, they're thinking over the short and the long term. How do we minimize that tax bill? And really, like you said there, that needs to be overlaid with what's this person actually trying to achieve over the long term? What's important to them? What are their long term goals and objectives? Or I think the way that you worded that is a good one too. Is like, what are their values? What's most important to them about money? And how do we make the legal structures and the tax structures line up with what is really important to them, rather than just have it be done as an ad hoc thing where you've got the lawyer builds something that is really good from an asset protection point of view but not good from a tax point of view, or the accountant builds something that's great from a tax point of view but not good from an asset protection point of view, and then you as a financial advisor are sitting there looking backwards at the things that have already happened going, well, they've structured that in a way that doesn't line up with where you're heading over the long term, so now we've got to go back and redraft that. So I think that's probably a good example there of, and it happens with all professionals. The same with with your lending or any your insurances, any of those sorts of things. Someone needs to be the hub of that in your life. And I think where we're all guilty of this is that there are professionals out there in the world, and you go to a professional and you get their advice or their input. We need to be able to categorize that as what's the advice I'm actually getting around. Is it around, if I'm going to an insurance broker to talk about my life insurance, they are going to be the best at telling me exactly what type of cover I need and when. They're not then going to overlay that with, however, if you're paying 10 grand a year for life insurance and that 10 grand is the difference between you being able to retire or not, what trade-offs are you willing to make there? Or if you're paying that 10 grand a year off, into insurance, that means that your lender is over here saying, hey, you should change your loan from interest only to principal and interest because we can get you a far cheaper interest rate, but it's going to cost you 10 grand a year. And so if you're not careful, you end up with all these different silos in your life, and none of them actually line up with the other one, and they're all sort of running along separate, I guess.
Yeah, look, and we think it's our role to actually to take charge of the structuring of all those silos and get all the sum of all those parts, get them working together.
Yep.
One thing that stands out, and when you raise this topic, Dallas, some of your thoughts that we spoke about just before we came on air was that you should be the financial advisor should be erring on the side of taking
too much.
Yeah.
If anything, you should be saying to your advisor, listen, mate, just calm down. Just get back in your box here. I don't
too
need
involved.
You
So I mean, I've heard a saying from another financial advisor from a podcast I listened to, and he talks about his dealings with his clients. He's an American guy. He said that that he has a rule with his clients where no conversation is off the table. So you should, so the client should be able to actually bring up any particular topic with the advisor and vice versa.
Yeah.
At that point in time, it's also the prerogative of the client to basically say,
I don't want to talk about.
I don't want to talk about that.
Yeah.
But they have a real open communication.
Yeah.
A relationship which I like.
Yeah.
And so leading up to our November, December end of calendar year reviews with our clients, we like to raise different topics that we're focusing on.
Yeah.
Part of that meeting is also saying, okay, you're still on track, or you're not on track for whatever reason, and sort of getting the plan back on track if someone's off track.
Yeah.
But we like to focus in on certain topics, have that discussion at that point in time, make any changes that you need to make. It's not then set and forget and never talk about it again, but we put that to bed for a period of time. So life insurance levels and things like that is a good example. We tend to have that conversation every 3 years because people's situation, it's too frequent to have that every year. People's situation tends to change every 3 years. So basically we have that conversation again. Now with estate planning, what we'll be doing is sitting down with our clients and saying, okay, well here's all of this flows through in the event of the death of one of you. Here's how it flows through to the second person. Obviously the overarching objective of pretty much everyone is to pay the least amount of tax at that point in time.
Yeah, and get the money to the right person.
Get the money to the right person and the right people.
Yeah.
Then on the death of the second one, or if the person's on their own as a single person already, then how does that money flow through to the right people or the right charities at that point in time with the least amount of tax deducted? Right. So, I mean, that'll be an offer that we make to our clients. Some of them will take it up, some won't. But again, with the theme of this podcast, we should be. Our belief is that we need to be raising these topics with our clients and actually bordering on taking too much, being involved too much in their lives as opposed to being involved.
Yeah, not enough. Yeah, I think that's right. And I guess the only other takeaway for me is, if you are self-directed or if you are trying to be self-directed, the important thing to bear, and then, like we say, the reason why we're fairly nosy with all these things is they all tie in together. It's not just that we want to get involved in the estate planning for the sake of trying to puff our chest out and think that we know more than the lawyers, which we don't. The point is that will how we structure your superannuation funds, for example, how they're owned and which who's listed as beneficiaries on each of those. That will be dependent on what you've got set up as a will. So and how you'll all of those sorts of things flow together with your tax and all that kind of thing. So, we're not trying to be nosy because we want to be the top dog. It's that we know that there's the way all these things flow in together is sometimes not as simple as what people sort of think. You can't just put those things in separate silos and they're not interacting. So if you are managing your own affairs with your own things, I think that's the other thing that I'd bear in mind is just whenever you're looking at any aspect of your financial life, just know that it does flow into other areas, and you really have to think about the second and third order consequences of the decisions that you make. And so if you're looking at something, going, I'm going to make this decision because it's going to be best from a tax point of view, or I'm going to make this decision because it's best from a Centrelink point of view, or a insurance costs point of view, or whatever it is. You've always got to then think of, okay, I can make that decision. It's going to be best from a tax point of view, but what impact does that have on the other areas of my financial life? And is there potential for the benefit that I've gained from making that decision to be more than offset by some of the other costs in other areas that I haven't taken into account? So, again, a fairly conceptual one today, but I just thought it was we live in a very, very complex financial world, more complex than probably it needs to be. It's sort of one of those things where everyone's life is impacted by all these different government entities and different legal systems, and even all these different things. So you may well wish it was simpler, but it just isn't. And the reality is, we have to remember that it is a complex system.
Thanks for listening.
Thank you for listening to the Money Over 50 podcast with Money Over 50 Financial Advisors. We look forward to catching up again soon.